Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our very first Founder Stories and Finance Journeys live stream with Triffin and two incredible founders from the beauty industry who many of you will know. We're joined by Elsie and Dominica from the brand BYBI. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. And to my left, I have the wonderful Frank, co-founder of Triffin.
Hello.
Hello.
Great to be here.
It is great to be here.
And yeah, really excited to be joined by Elsie and Dominica and to hear their story. And I think so many of our customers and audience will really relate to what they've been through. So yeah, delighted to be here.
So you have had an incredible journey and you've achieved what I think pretty much everyone sets out to achieve, which is start a brand, grow it, take it international, create viral products that are loved by people all around the world, and now a majority exit to Rebel Group. I mean, congratulations. How does it feel, first of all?
It's kind of weird hearing you say it like that, but yes, it feels great. We are in a really good place. Yeah.
And did you ever expect it to get to this? I know everyone dreams of it getting to this, but did you actually believe that would happen for you guys?
I think this was always the goal. We've been quite clear from the off, especially as a co-founder duo. We came into our partnership being really clear on what the objective was for the brand, but living the reality of it, because it's been 8 years as well since we started BYBI. I think there have been a number of moments where we weren't quite sure that we would get here, but it's been definitely where we set off to get the brand to.
I feel like 8 years is a classic example of the days are long, but the time is short. Like, I'm sure you've had some extremely stressful and tense moments along the way, but actually to achieve that in 8 years is an incredible feat. And I know that there'll be people across the beauty industry thinking, wow. Now, normally when you guys are interviewed, we talk all about the products and the brand and all that sort of stuff that you'd expect. But today we're going to be doing a different type of interview, really talking about your finance journey and the importance of cash flow and managing finances and the work you're now doing now with other brands. And I think that's many things areas that people don't like to focus on or think about. So let's start at the very beginning. I don't know who wants to kick off, but you came up with the idea, and how did the funding journey start?
Yeah, so I think we had quite an interesting route into creating BYBI in that we were running a content platform before we launched the brand. So we started our content platform in 2015, which was called Clean Beauty Insiders. And it was very inspired of the wellness trends that were hitting the UK at the time. Think Deliciously Ella, but for the skin. So there's lots of pictures of us on the internet with lots of green things on our face, like avocado and matcha. But essentially, we were trying to create content around beauty and wellness. And we really loved the idea of making your own skincare in your kitchen. So we quite literally started the business at our kitchen sink, mixing up kind of face masks and hair treatments. We started documenting that on Instagram, and then we built a really vibrant and engaged community, and then also on our blog. Through that, we got tons of press. We were at one point coined the faces of natural skincare in the UK. We had a book published by Penguin. We were running events. We built this, quite sophisticated kind of monetized content platform with Clean Beauty Insiders. But at that point, we kind of thought, well, actually running a brand is very scalable. Creating product is very scalable. But actually, there's a really obvious gap in the market for a natural skincare brand that still felt very, very vibrant, appealed to our kind of customer, which was very much a modern millennial woman who wanted great results from her skincare, but did have that niggle of ethics in the back of her mind, whether it was vegan, cruelty-free, sustainability. So we wanted to create a brand that really catered for that need. And we knew it wasn't being catered for because that's actually the reason why we started our blog. We were trying to create, interesting natural products that didn't exist. So we created BYBI and launched it in 2017.
And was that all funded by the business you already had at that point? So self-funded or funded via profits?
Yes and no. So yes, we were revenue generating, and that gave us, so the first 2 years we were still working in our day job. So BYBI and Clean Beauty Insiders was our night job, as it were. And that gave us, I guess, the proof of concept that we were able to generate revenue with this idea, even though it wasn't fully formed at that point into BYBI. We had an advance from Penguin for the book as well. We were taking money for the event. So that kind of eased things, and we put all of that, every bit of the revenue that we were generating at that point, into the plans for BYBI. But we also both agreed that we'd like to have an equal amount of savings put aside for when we decided to take the leap out of the day job and go full time on the business. So that was about £30,000 each that we had in the bank. We were working in sales roles, commission-based sales roles. So that was, we were able to kind of save that. And then in that journey as well, so this is sort of 2017, we also applied and got a Virgin startup loan, 25k per founder. And that was pre-launching BYBI, but we'd started full-time on the business at that point, and really that funded our first manufacturing run and the kind of the bones of the brand, packaging, design, working with an agency for that. So we had a number of pockets of, I guess, cash, and we both agreed that our own personal money would essentially be us paying a salary or lack of a salary, right? So the business wouldn't pay us until we got to a certain point, and we would rely on those savings to fund our own, personal commitments.
So it sounds like for people who are passionate about creating products, you were quite financially minded from the start. I mean, one thing I see about a lot of people whose brands come from products is they really are not thinking about finance. They're very much passionate about the products, its ingredients and formulations. But it sounds like you had both skills on your side.
I think it was also a really exciting time for kind of direct to consumer and independent beauty brands. If you think, this was the time of Glossier and Deciem, and there was so much appetite for independent brands, but I guess there was still not much available on the market. So we saw a lot of success early, which gave us a lot of confidence, a lot of momentum. But equally, we knew that this brand could scale really quickly. And we spoke to enough people and understood that would require finance. So I think we just wanted to do things properly, quickly. And that often means, seeking external funding. A lot of brands that we see, and we speak to them a lot ourselves now in the, in the next chapter of our lives, self-funded and grow really organically, which is super important because those founders tend to be really prudent on costs and focus on profitability, which is absolutely the right approach. But we were a bit of an era of, splash cash at things, let's grow quickly, let's get things to market really quickly because there was such a huge appetite and there was such a gap in the market.
So interesting to hear about just the initial funding of the business, because so many founders we work with and speak to, they start from a passion project or see a gap in the market and don't really think about the finances until it really becomes a problem.
Yeah.
And the fact that you guys were so kind of focused on the financial side of the business early on, I think it's quite rare.
I think it's rare as well.
Really rare,
Yeah.
And probably testament to you guys and obviously everything you've achieved.
Well, I think our sales background really helped with that as well, because we were naturally working with our own little mini portfolios in our sales role, and it's how we met. We were looking after similar patches of clients for the same company, and so you have that entrepreneurial mindset to a certain degree because you're working to financial targets. You're commission based as well, so there's no ceiling to what you can earn, and that's all in your control, and it's kind of you write your own destiny. So I think that really helped, that mentality and that mindset. But I would also say that we were late 20s at this point, and so we weren't just out of university. We didn't have the luxury of being able to live with our parents. We had financial commitments that we needed to uphold. There was no question. So we had to be smart about the way that we funded ourselves as well as our business, because we didn't want that to be a pressure, and we didn't want to get 3 months in and then one of us to say, I can't do this anymore, I can't afford it. So we had to be really mindful, and I think some of the founders that we meet at the moment are maybe a little bit younger and don't have those financial commitments, so can be a little bit more risky with some of their decisions.
But it also sounds like you had really honest conversations about money and very clear communication between the two of you, because it can be a very difficult topic for people to talk about. So preparing for not running out of money and having that conversation, I think, is very sensible.
Yeah, we've always had a very strong partnership based on communication, I would say. And again, we've met so many founders, as you can imagine, over the course of our decade-long entrepreneurship journey. And I do think that our success is down to the strength of our relationship and the way that we've been able to talk through and overcome a lot of the challenges, because the financial intertwining has got more in depth since those early days. being directors of a business, taking on financial liability, you know, we've had to be extremely honest with each other about our finances, both personal and from a business perspective. And I think that is, again, something that a lot of founders don't really think about. When you start a partnership with someone, you are becoming, for that moment, indefinitely financially intertwined with them. So you need to know things about like their credit rating. Have they, you know, these things.
Are they under any financial pressure?
Exactly.
And personal finances, I think, does bleed into what happens in business.
It's inevitable.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Again, so many the financial plans, I think, for founder-led brands isn't just about how much they want to grow, how much profit they want to generate. It's actually personal outcomes. How much does this person need to pay themselves this year?
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to buy a house or change their lifestyle and have these quite meaningful outcomes personally. And that all needs to be woven into how you manage the finance of the business, how you plan for these kind of things. And yeah, I mean, I think you guys have been through probably various stages of the business, and that probably changed what it meant for you personally. But yeah, would love to maybe just chat about the funding events actually, and how that changed expectations, ambitions, and probably what it meant for you guys day to day as well.
Yeah, I can do the first couple, and then because we've had quite a checkered past with funding, or a colourful past, should I say? So we got the Virgin Startup Loan. Would just highly recommend that for any UK-based business starting out. It's a really founder-friendly way to borrow money, and it's repayable over a long period of time. So, and also we really maximised our relationship with Virgin. We've done tons of PR stuff with them. Like, they're a really kind of open community. So that was a good sort of place to start. And then sort of 6 months or so later, we did our first pre-seed round of equity investment to friends and family, and that was kind of maximising our SEIS 150k, and that was mainly it was a sort of extended network thing. We actually used a platform at that point that was available. They've gone bust since, but they sent a message out to every single one of our LinkedIn contacts via like a kind of plug-in with our pitch deck, and that sounds absolutely terrifying. You can imagine the type of people that you're connected to on LinkedIn from your whole career, and the response we got back was incredible. It was like old bosses, or like people that, you know, ex-boyfriends or people we used to work with, like, hey, yeah, I've got a bit of money, just sold my house, like I'll put in 20k. So it was brilliant. So that was that was our first kind of toe in the water of equity fundraising.
And how did you find that as founders? I mean, it's especially, I sometimes think that friends and family round is difficult because the ex-boyfriend might be in it, or the old boss, you know.
Yeah. Well, we had an anchor investor who was from the industry. So I think, you know, a lot of people kind of join the round, and this is what we saw with our later rounds as well. If you've got a strong anchor investor with a good name, it draws in a lot of people because it inspires that confidence. So in that round, you know, the lead investor and main angel investor was an industry kind of veteran, and that really helped. And then subsequently, I'll just pick up where you left off. We did a seed raise that was led by Unilever Ventures. And that was quite a pivotal turning point in terms of our funding trajectory, the growth trajectory of the brand, but then also the gravitas around the brand, because we used the Unilever name to get in absolutely everywhere. And I think this is, again, what founders don't think about with funding, is that it can inspire confidence in many other areas of your business when you've got great investors. Retail partnerships is a big one. You know, if you're trying to bring in new manufacturing partners, negotiate on terms, enter new markets, when you're dealing with anyone that you're trying to sell your business to from a service perspective, having a strong investor base with good names can really, really help with those conversations. And then similarly, the name of Unilever has helped us pull in some other extraordinary venture capital or private equity names onto the cap table, as well as other angels. So again, thinking about it almost as like a brand marketing proposition is something that a lot of founders don't think about, but your cap table can be incredibly, incredibly valuable to you. So yeah, we did that £1 million raise, and then about 24 months later, when we were entering the US, we did our Series A, which was about £5 million in total through various different instruments, which are like the truth behind the headlines. When you Google it, it's like boom, but then it's actually like we got a bit here, we got a bit there, we got this converted, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, we did big Series A, and that was in the middle of COVID. We were both heavily pregnant, and we were launching in the US.
Wow.
And it was quite a time for us. It was the best and worst in some ways, because we had this, incredible buzz around the brand, and we were scaling so quickly, and obviously had just closed this big fundraise, but it was, then the work really started. After that, we've not done kind of big rounds. We've kind of dabbled in a little bit of asset finance, which randomly got some really good press, if you Google us as well. We've done some bridging rounds, but that kind of just got us to where we needed to be today, which is looking at restructuring the business with a new kind of owner, which is so exciting for us because I think, that is where we wanted to take the brand for sure.
And in terms of that journey of, seed round, Series A, financial instruments you just mentioned, was all this new to you as you went? Because you weren't from a finance background, you were from a sales background.
It was totally new.
How did you handle the learning curve around it, and what advice would you give to other brands
I think
that area? Because some of it is quite confusing, especially some of the instruments and structures.
100%. Yeah, totally. And you're also at risk if you don't fully understand it of signing up for something that could be detrimental to your business further down the line. And, a further extent possibly being taken advantage of you not understanding exactly what you're signing up for. So, a lot of our learning journey was around surrounding ourselves with really trusted people that we could ask what felt like the stupid questions. We had a few kind of mentors and advisors who weren't necessarily part of the funding journey, but had a more sophisticated understanding of this kind of thing. And in the early days, we could throw them questions and felt like they had our back and they would give us an honest answer. A lot of it was just learning as you go, like asking the stupid questions, even in the environments that you feel a bit nervous to do that. When the lawyers get involved, when you're kind of working with institutions, like asking the lawyers the questions as well, like as many, like bugging them, apart from if you're paying them, then they just bill you for that. So I think it's just about kind of trying to be a sponge and absorbing that information as much as you can. But it has been a steep kind of learning curve, probably one of the steepest in the entire sort of personal development journey of building a brand. But it's in some ways it's the most rewarding because we weren't from finance backgrounds and now we can speak to our journey and speak to the world of finance within our industry quite knowledgeably. And that does feel like, okay, we're walking away. We're not walking away, we're still there, but we're walking to the next stage of our journey with something that we didn't start it with, and that's quite rewarding.
Something I'm really interested in is how you guys would weight the importance, let's say, of the overall success picture from brand, product, and then finance and operations of the business, because obviously all three need to work really well. But if you're going to say, what kind of has the biggest impact on success out of those three, and maybe which one has the biggest detriment on success if it's not done well, what would you say?
Well, I think to your point, all three have to kind of work harmoniously together for success. I wouldn't say that you can be successful with just a great brand or just a great finance function. I think, we brought on finance initially externally and then in-house. And I would say we probably did it too late. And that was probably the one area of our business where we kind of overpaid, but it slightly underdelivered because we were so startup in so many ways, but then we had raised so much money and we had such huge revenue ambitions, and trying to marry the two of trying to get this kind of slightly chaotic startup into the mind frame and the processes to be able to scale was quite challenging. And it took a lot of manual work. And I think if we had been bought that function internally earlier, it would have been a huge help for us. I think the things that have always been really challenging in our business, and for sure that this is a common thread, is cash flow management as it pertains to stock management. And those two things can be crippling for a business because if you have too much stock, it's obviously tied up in cash, but if you don't have enough stock, you're missing sales. And I feel like we were constantly in this ebb of flow of betting on the wrong SKU because we didn't have the right data points. So we would kind of blindly just order stock, and then it would sit there, and then one of our other SKUs would take off, and then we were chaotically trying to get that in stock, and we were always kind of chasing our tail. And only when we brought in really good operations and finance functions into the business were we starting proper stock forecasting and then cash flow management off the back of that. That was quite a pivotal turning point for us.
And what point of the business did you do that, bring that in-house and have that all?
Yeah, Series A was the real turning point for our business, I would say, because it also, I think when you're a seed business, you can kind of, investors are a little bit less, pedantic about some of the T's crosses and the I's, whatever that phrase is. From Series A, we had board meetings, we had to prepare board packs, our monthly management accounts had to be there on time. It was a very rigorous process, which, again, we should have got into the habit of sooner. I think it would have helped us prepare for the scale better and probably been less stressful for us as well.
There's so much talk at the moment about the next generation of success stories, staying lean, outsource as much as possible. If you were going to do it again, is there anything that you would change in terms of whether it be internal hires, just the kind of roles, and even how you'd maybe think about the team, on that scaling journey?
Yes. I mean, team has been such a huge challenge, and I think for any founder, it's something that it doesn't come naturally, and it didn't come naturally to us. We didn't come necessarily from management type roles, so just the kind of interaction of building a team from the off, we've always struggled with. I think there have been, if we look back on the journey and to where we are now, there were probably moments where we overhired or hired too quickly. And yes, in retrospect, they were decisions that probably had a detrimental effect on not necessarily the business's success, but the rest of the team and just the dynamic of the way that we were building that team. And I don't know if we've managed to get the right balance of what level of seniority you need for a role. And sometimes we've brought in people who are far too junior and expected far too much from them. And you see that happening a lot at the moment. The kind of job specs that you see some of the sort of like high growth businesses recruiting for at the moment, and they're basically asking for like a head of marketing, but they package it up as a social media executive and pay 25 grand. Like, I think we've definitely made that mistake in the past and had too high expectations, but equally we've brought in too senior at some points. And when you're thinking about hiring somebody at a very senior level, and we've had finance director, marketing director, and a managing director and an ops director at one point, at points over the business's history, you need to feel comfortable that you're ready for that as a founder, because it means you delegate. And the only way it works is you delegate properly. And you don't half delegate and then try and keep an eye on everything, because it doesn't give those level of that senior kind of team the autonomy that they really need or the responsibility that they really need. And equally, you end up just like tripling your workload. So I think we've never really got the balance of seniority right, and probably hired, too late at times.
And did you manage to delegate properly? Because that's incredibly hard to do, isn't it?
I think we got into a rhythm, but I think, as Elsie said, it's never been a natural kind of, it's never been something that fulfills us in the same way that some of the other elements of the business did. So I think the structure that we have now in the business, where effectively we don't have a team, it's all centralized, is just the dream for us, because we can still execute and strategize and run the business in the way that we want with counsel, but we're not having to really worry about the day-to-day execution. So to your point about how businesses are run these days, that is the strategy, it seems. And obviously things like AI and technology can so heavily replace some teams or some people that you would normally hire, that it is really cost effective to run a business these days if you get your product right and sales come organically and virally. If you're still looking at pushing product out in a traditional way, heavily retail led, heavily marketing led, I would say that team, you can't necessarily kind of run a super lean team. But there are some businesses we've seen like TikTok, they absolutely blown up and their teams are a few people. So again, I think things have changed a lot in the last 10 years of when we've been running a business. And I think also that's part of the reason why you never want to remove yourself from the industry in any capacity, whether you've exited your business or, whatever your journey is because things move so quickly. You step out for 6 months and then suddenly everything's so different. Yeah. So it's really important with these things constantly changing and technology is changing so fast that as founders, you need to keep your head in the game, because we're definitely not done with our journey. We've got so much more to achieve, and there's no point in us kind of taking a couple of years off and coming back and then suddenly the world is a different place. So
let's come back to cash flow. And, Frank, it would be great if you could tell us about the Triffin product and what it does, because these businesses, these e-commerce businesses, are it's a pretty harsh landscape where a great success, i.e. a massive order from Target, can actually put the business under horrific pressure and possibly decimate it. So what does Triffin do and how does it help?
Yeah, so suppose like BYBI, many of our customers are growing quickly, expanding across sales channels, markets, especially within beauty, health and wellness, like launching in retail and scaling retail, and obviously very, very different cash flow dynamics within retail distribution versus direct to consumer. So first of all, the increased complexity it's just harder to stay on top of, harder to manage. You've got, and you've mentioned already, the importance of managing stock and making sure you've got the right volume of SKUs, and obviously inventory, production, purchasing timelines aligning with, how many products you intend to sell. So really, I think the first thing is just having that complete visibility of the timing of inflows and outflows, and that's the thing that a lot of founder-led brands that don't have internal finance teams really struggle with. So, let's say you get this game-changing order from a resale partner, or even just one particular product's kicking off. You've just launched on TikTok Shops and something's going well. You need to have enough stock. You need to be able to buy more stock on the timeline that makes sense in terms of your sales trajectory. But you also need to have enough cash to front both the stock cost and the marketing cost, and be able to essentially have the revenue circle back to the business in enough time so you're not going to put yourself at any risk. There's actually a huge amount of complexity in all of that, and unless you're quite sophisticated in how you operate, it can be potentially very risky. So it can be quite damaging for a lot of businesses, and I'm sure tons of founders get into these really quite stressful cash flow situations when they've maybe overinvested. But also what we see a lot of is that founders can be really cautious and they can underinvest. So because they're so terrified about getting into cash flow problems, they don't spend enough, and actually they've got lots of room to invest more in marketing, maybe purchase higher volumes of inventory and actually grow faster. And we see it impact the business the other way as well.
I mean, you mentioned, and Frank and I talk about this, the management accounts coming each month, and you got into the rigor and discipline of that. But even that's quite late, isn't it, compared to some of the real-time cash decisions you might have to make, or spending decisions. What difference do you think it would have made to have a live to the second, to the day?
Well, daily, I think that obviously the time and information changes across different systems. But if you just think about the daily changes in sales, marketing performance, when purchase orders are cut, new sales invoices being created, all these kind of things, really kind of think about like there's changes daily. Then there's certain cycles which make sense on a weekly basis, a monthly basis. Management reporting obviously being a monthly thing. You may be looking at more strategic decision making on the back of those various frequencies. So I think one is just part of the challenge is actually getting access to the information, and a lot of businesses really struggle to get access to all of that information, and that would be down to things like understanding margins and profitability across sales channels, across markets, having visibility on cash flow, these kind of things. And then the second thing, which is actually really difficult, is knowing what to do with that information, and actually trying to make sense of that, and understand what the right thing is for the business. And I think most of the founders that we work with, they're super ambitious. They want to grow the business. They want to launch new products. They want to expand to new markets. They want to launch new sales channels. But really, kind of understanding, either do they have enough money to do that, and if they don't, how much they need is a key part of what they need, essentially.
What difference do you think it would have made to you guys at various points over that journey?
Honestly,
we tell Franklin all the time.
Yeah, we always say we wish that this was around when we first launched. I think that it would have made a huge difference to the way that we managed our kind of financial strategy, both in that it would have allowed us just to be faster acting, and as you say, not wait for reporting to come and then retrospectively be looking for trends. But also it would have freed up the finance team that we did have in place over the course of the business. It would have freed up their time just to be able to look at more higher level strategic projects that were probably more in line actually with their experience, and just give that degree of automation that basically means that they weren't spending like so much time building these kind of forecasts. So it would have made a huge difference, and I think probably the knock-on effect of that would have been better for profitability, just not such a stressful time around cash, and being able to invest in things kind of sooner, new product and marketing, as Franklin said. We wish that you had invented it.
That's always good to hear.
6 years ago.
So before we wrap up, because we are out of time, which is such a shame because we could obviously talk all day, just if you could tell everyone what you're up to now. Are you sailing off into the sunset and sitting on the beach drinking pina coladas?
We should, because in that time we've had 4 children, 2 children each. So really we just deserve an extremely long nap. But no, I think like to the point I just made, you know, we are not getting off the wheel because I think we've still got lots to achieve. BYBI is, you know, still got lots to achieve and entering into a really exciting new chapter. So we want to be around for that. But also, you know, female founders and UK British beauty brands are such a huge passion point for us. We see how underserved female founders are in this space because we have been through that journey. And also there's just not enough UK brands like taking on the global scape. You know, we need to have more success. So we really want to support early stage businesses. So we are spending a bit of time kind of doing advisory and consulting alongside, obviously still working on our first child, which is BYBI, and some other exciting projects as well. So, but the consultancy work I think is really enjoyable for us because it's, you know, this conversation is one of many that we have with the founders that we work with, just telling them the pitfalls that we fell into, but also what worked for us. And that's important to feedback both of those things to people building their businesses these days.
Well, I think you'd have loads of founders queuing up to speak to you, especially after hearing today's session. And you're partnering with Triffin, aren't you, to bring in that?
And for us, I think it's really, really complementary because what you guys have been through and done and growing the business in new markets and new channels and some of the experience you've had is so relevant to a lot of our customers. So for sure, we're excited to be partnering. Also, some of the brands you're working with, huge potential just from those that we've spoken to so far. We can see that there's some more exciting growth journeys coming there. So more to come.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for joining us today. Thank you, Franklin, for joining us. Thank you to everyone who's watched online. We don't have time for questions today, but if people want to get in touch with you, where can they get in touch with both you guys and you, Franklin?
Absolutely, yeah.
LinkedIn is probably the best place.
Yeah. LinkedIn, for BYBI.
The same, LinkedIn. I think this is the best place and we can connect the guys where relevant,
Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.